Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Colonizing Kerbin. It is Joseph, and this is episode 12 of our series. And as you can see, I'm once again back in the Astronaut Center recruiting even more Kerbals into the program because we are going to be launching another space station into orbit. So last episode, we launched a research station into orbit to study the effects of low gravity on our Kerbals, but now we are going to be launching a ring station into orbit in order to, well, it's going to have a couple of uses. So this ring station is going to serve as a gateway station for most of our Kerbals that are going interplanetary or going to the Mun later on in the series. But also, it's time the Kerbins started researching how to create artificial gravity. And this is something in real life that we are going to have to start figuring out for long-term space travel. So this ring station is basically to research that and serve as a gateway station. And it can hold a lot of Kerbals. Okay, so we are launching this into space at this time. And what you can see, the booster that we have has got a lot of rocket power going on here. Essentially, imagine if you took the main booster of the Saturn V, doubled it in height, and then had a central one with 6 circling it. You essentially have this booster. Now, this whole episode is pretty much all reusable systems, and this is my HOPTM number 4 booster, and it is designed to get my really heavy stuff into orbit, but also be able to safely return to the surface of Kerbin. Now, you may be able to see as you go through this episode some support beams that are running up between the rings, and these support beams are strutted and designed to make sure that these rings don't move around, and you're going to see why later on in the episode. Essentially, to give it away early, these rings are able to spin. They have the robotic rotor parts attached to them, the largest rotors that you can use. Oh, looks like we got a clean separation, and now the OPTM, is that what I call it? I can't even remember my own system, is now circularizing us into orbit. And I decided to match the inclination of the orbit to the Mun, so a 0-degree inclination, an equatorial orbit. So just like with the previous boosters that you've seen, I got to turn the booster around. Eventually, I turn on the engines to slow us down just enough so that the booster doesn't burn up in the atmosphere. Since this one was heavy and we had a pretty high orbit that we were going into, I think I'm setting, if I remember right, I'm setting the we'll see in a few minutes, but I'm putting the station roughly around 100 kilometers into orbit. So it's coming down from a long way, so we had to slow down significantly, but luckily there's plenty of fuel in this thing, and there's 9 engines per booster you see on this thing, so there's a lot of, it's got a pretty decent thruster-weight ratio, and it's touched down safely. So I'm now just doing a little bit of readjustment to my inclination. I just set the Mun as my target and then align my orbit to it. And yeah, it looks like about 110 kilometers, 110.4-ish kilometers is where I decided to circularize this ring station. So I really like the idea of ring stations, and a year or two ago, maybe 3, I'm not sure, I'll link it in the video, but I was contemplating doing this eventually. This is part of the reason why I wanted to start playing Kerbal Space Program, was to, colonize the planets and do these sort of semi-realistic structures. And I always thought, it'd be really cool if there was a way to make a ring station and the rings actually rotated. So when I started, experimenting with Kerbal Space Program, I couldn't really figure out how that would work. And, I was in the early stages of learning how to play the game. And then all of a sudden, Matt Lowne came out with this great video where he had learned to basically, to make a ring station that functioned just like this. So the idea, how everything works pretty much is based upon his designs, but I'm really glad he came out with that video because I really wanted to do a ring station of my own. So if Matt Lowne ever runs into this video, he'll probably notice that the ring station looks probably similar to the three or four ring stations he's done. Mainly because in order to get the rings to rotate and function, you really have to do it the Matt Lowne way. And Matt Lowne, in the original video that he does his first ring station that rotates, he actually credits someone on Twitch or Reddit, I can't remember, or Discord, that gave him the idea of how to do that. So, if you want to track down who the original person was that inspired how this ring station works, definitely you can follow the trail there, but that's about as far back as I can go. So right now, what you've seen so far is we've deorbited the OPTM with the beams that were supporting the ring, so they want to rotate as they go into orbit. And now we're launching a docking module that'll allow us to dock spacecraft to the station. This is my HOPTM 2. It's basically just a single Saturn V booster fuel container with 9 of the Mastodon engines. So kind of a bit of a step down. And so here is the module here. It just has the same engine system that the LKO transport last episode is using. And we must have missed the OPTM didn't quite survive, but hey, SpaceX doesn't get it right all the time either. So this module, as you can see, has 4 arms. So it'll allow 4 spacecraft to dock with the station. And possibly in the future, since this module can be remotely controlled, I could essentially put more modules into this space station if I wanted to expand the size of it or not. So I kind of had that in mind in case I wanted to. This is the only part of the mission that isn't reusable. This little thing right here, kind of like SpaceX's Crew Dragon, the module that moves that is not reusable either. All right, so now our Kerbals have their first single stage to orbit space plane here. And how I get this thing into orbit, it has what we call the Rapier engines. So they have a really high efficiency in the air, and there's 4 of them. So this is getting, it's pretty easy to get this craft into orbit. And about roughly around 20 to 22,000 feet up, I'm able to close off the intakes and put the Rapiers into basically into a closed cycle mode. So that means they start, instead of just using liquid fuel and intaking air from the atmosphere, they can use liquid fuel and oxidizer. And I just have enough oxidizer so that the Rapiers can get us into a suborbital trajectory. And then this nuclear engine we have here is what's going to use the rest of the fuel. Now, a really good player of this game could probably use this SSTO to go to Duna. I think when I tested it, I found that, with a few gravity assists off of other planets, I could get this to Duna and back. But for the most part, I'm going to be using this to transfer Kerbals up to space stations in low Kerbin orbit whenever I don't feel like using the LKO. The passenger capacity is, I'm trying to remember, let's see, 4, so 8 Kerbals in the crew modules, those central modules, and then 2 pilots. So basically 10 Kerbals are on the space plane, and there's 8 passengers. And these 8 passengers are going to eventually move on to one of our colonies coming up in later episodes. So keep watching the series to see where these 8 Kerbals eventually end up going. And I'm just transferring them now into the rings. Then these panels are separating from our power stations and science stations, and also our monopropellant fuel tank stations. And then the robotic arms extend for us to have our, our dishes, which are way overpowered and not necessary, but look cool, and radiators and solar panels. There's a lot of RTGs on this thing too. Now we're going to have Gilly, one of our newest Kerbins to get out and do a little bit of an inspection of the station. You can see the RTGs there and the monopropellant tanks. There's a ladder that runs up the whole length of this. There's a science lab and some more monopropellant tanks and some... there's our science. So we can run all the science up here that is able to be used in space. So yeah, there's a good look at our station. You may have also noticed that there are the new LED strips on those docking arms. So that way, each of the docking arms has their own color coding. So there's docking arm blue, docking arm red. So it just kind of helps me keep track of where we're docking. And now I've set the rings to rotate in opposite directions, so that way the space station doesn't start moving around, flipping around. Set the RPM to roughly around 10, and then set the torque to about 1, and that gets us a decent spin rate. Now, I could do a bunch of math and figure out how to actually more accurately get this, but this station is technically way too small. If this were in real life, astronauts would not be enjoying using this space station because the speed at your feet would be way too different than the speed at your head. But, you know, the Kerbals are smaller and this isn't real life. This is for fun. So, hope you guys enjoyed seeing this launch into orbit, and I'll see you next time.